Hello, I'm Stephen Berry and welcome to the Executive Business Network, the series where we bring you leading experts to help you tackle the difficult challenges confronting your business. Today we're looking at projects and why so many projects fail. And joining me in the studio, hello Alan Peck.
Hi Stephen, how are you?
I'm good. Well, thanks for joining us. Now, you're a lecturer, university lecturer. You lecture in entrepreneurship.
Yep.
You've been around innovation for a long time and you
Yep.
have a special interest in projects and particularly why a lot of projects fail.
Yep.
Tell us about the kind of things we'll be looking at today.
I'd also say too that I've also owned my own businesses, and that, I think that's an important point because it's not all just university area. But what we're talking about today is common reasons why projects do succeed and fail, and the interesting points that I've observed both from my experience working with a lot of startups myself, both my own and other people's, and there are typical things that happen, and my aim today is to share them with the viewers, and so that they don't have to repeat them for themselves.
Well, that's great. And obviously there's a lot of money tied up with projects, so it's in our interest to make sure they succeed. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Yeah. And let's make a start. Statistics show that many projects fail. Do we really understand the reasons why that is?
Both in university and also helping people doing startups and the startups that I've done myself, there is very common things. Probably the number one thing is that when you're talking and thinking about a project, it's very easy to expand it. And therein lies the number one problem. Whether I have students, whether I have people, I work with the Victorian Government in an innovation program, where they come in and because it costs nothing to think, they expand and expand and expand and ultimately do nothing. So the opposite to that is to do one thing really well, and drawing on Peter Drucker's 7 sources and 5 principles of innovation, which I've found to be incredibly practical. He says that when you're starting a new project, you should do something when you have a focused market, a specific need. It requires limited resources, limited people and limited money. Now that tends to contradict a lot of what we hear. For example, when we see someone like Google, who, when they did their fundraising, the first initial public fundraising they did was for $25 million. So that's when we usually come in and see it. But in reality, Google, like all startups, actually started, most of them by accident, by the way. They started at university where they were going to do a similar system to a library referencing system. They started in their room at university. And when they actually went to name the name Google, they misspelled it because they'd had a few drinks and it meant to be infinite, which is a different spelling. And they started with less than $1,000, at less than $1,000 for Google. And then they took the typical paths. So they focused on one specific thing, which was to provide an independent, non-advertising related search engine. That's all they did. And when people first trialled that, and they had them in test areas and they clicked on it and the white screen came up with Google in the middle, they just sat there and did nothing. And they said, what are you doing? They said, we're waiting for the ads. The page hasn't loaded. So they made it very, very simple. And they started with less than $1,000. Then after that, they had one of the gentlemen who did another software company gave them $100,000. And at that stage, he wrote a check out to them and they didn't even have a bank account. And then it went family, friends and fools, and then a fundraising. So the point is, the big thing is keep it simple, keep it with limited resources. I mean, you were talking about Ray Kroc and McDonald's earlier on today. Well, if I came to you in 1955 when he started and said, I was Ray Kroc, and I said, Stephen, I've got the idea of a lifetime. I'm going to sell hamburgers, fries and soft drinks. What do you think about that? I mean, it's not exactly,
Rocket science.
Rocket science. What did he do? What was the simple, specific need he did? The answer is that he said, I'm going to do it in a production style method and I'm going to do it quickly and it's going to be uniform. And in that case, in terms of innovation, we talk about innovation as being these massive changes in our society. In fact, there are very few massive changes ever in our society. For example, people talk about the internet, which has changed us dramatically, and yet the printing press is still the most dramatic change in productivity in the history of our life. It went from monks being able to produce 1,100 pages a year to instantly it was to being able to produce 250,000 pages at the start, and now it's hundreds of millions of pages. So, but they come along once in a lifetime pretty well. And what the innovation can be is another form of innovation internally, not a massive innovation. In the case of Ray Kroc and McDonald's, his innovation was process innovation. And what happened there was he's an ex-Navy guy. So he actually built McDonald's. He worked on ships where everybody has a position. They're a crew member, if that sounds familiar with McDonald's. And they have a crew station. And he even has the alarms from the ships on it. And he runs it as basically a land-based ship. And his innovation was process, not actually anything about burgers, fries. Now, but if you told people at the start, they would have belittled it. But he met one simple, specific need, and that is the key to avoid the temptation to expand out, because it's easy in your head, but you convert one good idea into reality. As, for example, Whiteout, which Mike Nesmith's mother did, it took her 18 years doing it in the lounge room before she went one product.
But doesn't your theory fly in the face of conventional wisdom, which talks a lot about this notion of step change, right? So quite dramatic change away from doing things the way we used to. You're talking more about incremental change.
I am, because our life is made up of incremental change. Very few, like for example, ships used to dominate transport, and then there was disruptive technology of aeroplanes, and that was a long time ago. Well, the jumbo jet's first flight was in 1969. And you think about the cars, the fashion, all that. Well, basically the Airbuses come along now, but really, that's a long time ago, and those sort of changes are very few in our lifetime, and that's where people, if they're waiting to do some dramatic, huge change, they probably won't do it, and very few people ever do. But the little changes, the dramatic changes, for example, a simple example is clothing. We've had it all our lives. Now Zara came along, Zara clothing, which is going very well, and they said, what will we do? And they did a process change, and they completely blew apart the concept of how people have been running clothing with one simple concept. They said, imagine treating a clothing company like a perishable goods company, where things became out of stock, basically they'd use by date of a month. So instead of taking 7 to 10 months to produce their goods, they produce 12,000 light items a year, and they make them last for 4 to 6 weeks, and they pay 17 times the average labour cost that people who get their clothes done in China do. Now they've completely, but the clothes, their shirt, top, dress, there's nothing changed about it. There never will be. Regardless of what Star Trek thinks about the whole world being in Velcro and velour.
We talked about incremental change. So if you're only going to have a couple of key features, obviously you need to ensure that they're critical features.
The right ones, and also that they're done properly. One thing is done properly, and that's where I talk about Peter Drucker. I'm a great fan of Peter Drucker, not because it's theoretical, but because we have seen, not through my own business, through other startups, through the 1,000 I've studied literally within the universities, that you can go back to them and you can see that they're relevant every time. And so one of them, for example, and this is a key area, is that everybody gets presented with opportunities. Big companies, which I've worked for, large companies as well as doing my own thing, they tend to believe, because they've got power, that they will, force a situation, they'll make something work. Now, history shows that's not true. And one of the things that Peter Drucker talks about that we've found to be absolutely true is called the unexpected success or the unexpected failure. It's actually, what it is about awareness. Awareness is the number one thing for success in innovation, whether you are a large company, whether you're a small operator, whether you're trying to do something within a big company. And one of the biggest mistakes that large organisations and even smaller SMEs do is that if you've got funds to resource something at a certain level, you put them into new innovation. But there's an old joke about a guy who goes to the doctor and he's got a twitch, and the doctor said, look, I've got good news and bad news. I've got a drug that will stop your twitch, but the side effect is it actually intensifies your personality. And the guy said, well, what's wrong with that? And he said, well, you're a fool already, so I don't want to do any more on that. Now, the point is that even if you're in a large corporation, they've got to fight that desire to do things on a big scale, and they've actually got to do it on the smallest scale possible, because if it fails, it will fail on a massive scale just the same as it would fail on a small scale. And that goes against the corporate thinking. It's very hard to do that, with the exception of people like 3M and things like that. So that unexpected success and failure, it's about paying attention, looking at the market as an elephant and saying, well, I'm not going to try to make the elephant do anything. And I challenge large companies to not think they can control something, but they can't do that. What they've actually got to do is look at the elephant, see what the elephant's doing, and then react to the elephant. And I'll give you a classic example. When they put in mobile phones, as basically an afterthought, they thought, okay, the signal can drop in and out. Now, if we get into an emergency situation and people need to communicate, often the voice-activated work will not work. So what we'll do is we'll put a 160-character messaging system in for emergencies. That was the point of SMS messaging. And now that's a multi-billion-dollar industry, because what they did is they didn't say people should stop doing that. They said, okay, that's what people are using it for, we'll grab onto it. And there are stories throughout history of the key is not actually forcing the market, but picking a simple, single thing, seeing some people grab onto it, and then optimising that. That's the key.